Tennessee doesn't have many position battles heading into fall camp in a couple of weeks, but the most important position battles reside on the offensive line. It could make or break the season. That and a whole lot more. It's your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Thursday, everybody. Welcome into it. This is Locked On Vols. It is your team every single day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys being here today. It's going to be a fun one. Position battles, offense in segment 1, defense in segment 2. There's not a whole lot of position battles, but there are some important ones. And then we're going to talk with Mike Wilson about the Major League Baseball draft, Tennessee related. Mike Wilson of Knox News, all that and more here on a Thursday, Locked On Vols. All right, so there's not that many position battles for Tennessee when you really think about it, offensively, defensively, and that's a credit to where this roster is right now. That's a credit to Josh Heupel entering year 3, roster management, a successful 2022 campaign, getting guys from the transfer portal, and of course, recruiting at the high school level and bringing into the program and developing. There's been some patchwork here and there for sure, and there's some shortcomings in recruiting at times. I mean, yeah, that's a conversation for another day. Speaking of, it's a big July, in terms of some announcements coming up. We'll be keeping tabs on that. But overall, there's not that many position battles. But there are a couple that are very key, and we're going to start on the offensive line. 2 in particular on the offensive line. That's going to be huge. Number 1 position battle offensively is the left guard position, okay? So you got a guy in Jerome Carvin that essentially was, one of the more underrated players for Tennessee each of the past couple of seasons. All he did was play and show up and play at a high level. He went undrafted, but he's getting an opportunity with the Kansas City Chiefs. That is a huge hole at the left guard position. And, coming into fall camp, it's pretty much a 3-way battle between Ollie Lane, Andre Carrick, the transfer from Texas, and Addison Nichols. In terms of those 3 options right there, again, you go in and get a guy from the transfer portal because you want to come in, you want to play him. And I'm not sure that we gave Andre Carrick the benefit of the doubt in spring. I'm not saying he's going to be the starting left guard. I'm not saying he'll take over the starting left guard position in week 2 or week 3. I'm just saying he only had 14 to 15 practices in spring to get adjusted to the playbook, to get adjusted to the tempo, and playing around beside guys that he's never played around before. So I think that's big. I think this fall camp is going to be big for Andre Carrick. You have Addison Nichols, who is a rising sophomore. He proved, it's not the best case scenario, but he proved that he can be the backup center if need be for Cooper Mays. But Addison Nichols is a guard, and that's his home position, and he's been practicing. He's had a good year since coming in from the high school ranks in terms of transforming his body and putting on some muscle and all that type of stuff. And I do believe that Addison Nichols will be a player in this left guard position. It wouldn't shock me at all if Addison Nichols turns out to win that job at some point or another. But I want to tell you who the favorite is and who I think will start game 1. I think that's Ollie Lane. Ollie Lane from Gibbs High School, right down the road from campus at the University of Tennessee. He's been here, I believe this is now his 5th year, and he's been around the program, and this is year 3 in the offense for him as well. And he's played a lot of football in this offense. He was a key contributor, played a whole lot in the 2021 season due to injuries and trying to figure some things out as well. And he was a part, again, it was you and me playing defense out there, but he was a part of one of the best offensive performances in program history against Missouri at Missouri back in the 2021 season. So from an experience standpoint, you feel good about Ollie Lane. And I don't think it's the end of the world if Ollie Lane's your starter, but the left guard position is critical for fall camp, and they've got to find an answer there for sure. Don't rule out Andre Carrick now. He was brand new in spring, so it'll be a major fall camp for him. But Ollie Lane's the favorite, and Addison Nichols will be a player in that one. Number 2 position battle on offense that I think is critical, and they got to figure some things out. It's the right tackle position. We are under the assumption that these positions are safe in terms of knowing the starter. Quarterback Joe Milton, wide receivers 1 and 2 on either side. That's Brew McCoy and Ramel Keaton. Tight ends 1, 2, and 3 essentially. Left tackle would be John Campbell coming over from Miami. We're assuming that he's going to win that job, which I believe he has. Center, Cooper Mays, and right guard, Javonte Spraggins. So we go to right tackle. And for me, I'm not as worried about this because the two guys, really three guys if you include Dane Davis in there, who's a swing man, these two guys have played. They split the left tackle position all last year for the nation's #1 offense. Was it ideal? No. But these guys have been there. They've done that. They've got battle scars. Gerald Mincey should win that job. Gerald Mincey won the job out of camp this last year. Gerald Mincey's who they want to play because he's athletic, he's big, he's strong, he's got all the intangibles. J.J. Crawford's played it and played at a high level, and he's a great guy to have in there if you need him for sure. And, of course, Dane Davis has been in this offense as well. So one of those guys got to jump up and take it, obviously. One of those guys have got to get in there and be the guy. But I'm not as worried about the right tackle position. And overall for the offensive line spots, it's critical, it's important, but this offense helps. This offense does help, spreading things out, throwing it around a little bit, the tempo. I'm going to have faith in this offensive line that they're going to figure it out, but the offensive line is where this conversation starts. Number 1 was left guard. Number 2 was right tackle. My number 3, and these last two that I'm going to mention are really not that big of a deal because football has a way of working itself out. But number 3 position battle heading into fall camp is the slot position. Ramel Keaton's earned the right to be a starter on one side. Brew McCoy is going to be the starter on the other side. Dont'e Thornton coming in from Oregon is a slot receiver. There's some versatility to his game. He can play on the outside, and he will play on the outside if there is injuries or some sorts to the nature. But Dont'e Thornton's a slot receiver, and he is very much different than Squirrel White, who played slot last year in place of Jalen Hyde at times, and of course came into mop-up duty and started the Orange Bowl and caught a touchdown. You know, you've got Squirrel White, who's about 5'10", 160 pounds, and you got Dont'e Thornton, that's about 6'3", over 200 pounds, long, explosive. You really like what you have there in the slot position. I think both of those guys will play. Now, if history's any indicator, I mean, we say this all the time, Tennessee really only plays 3 receivers. And so, you know, one of those guys is going to be out there for a while. But in terms of the overall snap count, it will work itself out, in my opinion, because that's how football works. I think Tennessee's going to play 4 receivers this year. Keaton, Brew McCoy, Dont'e Thornton, and Squirrel White. But my number 3 position battle heading into fall camp would be the slot position. And number 4 would be RB1. Again, running backs, Tennessee, top to bottom's got one of the deepest running back rooms in the SEC, and in my opinion, one of the deeper running back rooms in all college football. There's no Superman there, but there's a lot of guys who have played, have experience, and know what it takes. I think Jalen Wright, I mentioned this earlier, in the last couple of shows, will be the breakout star for Tennessee this year. But RB, the running back position, if you will be by committee. They will play Jabari Small. They will play Jalen Wright. They will play Dylan Sampson. Maybe play Cam Seldon a little bit. But in terms of RB1A, if you will, is it going to be Jabari Small, who's been that each of the last 2 years? Or is it going to be Jalen Wright? Jalen Wright might be the RB2 or the RB option B, if you will, behind Jabari Small. But I could see Jalen Wright leading the team in carries, leading the team in yards and in touchdowns. We will have to see, but I think that is something to pay attention to as well. Again, nitpicking really the last kind of 2, but the big ones, left guard and right tackle. Tennessee's got to figure that out in fall camp if you want to get back to where you were last year in 2022. All right, so we heard about the offense. Position battles, the biggest ones. What about the biggest defensive position battles heading into fall camp? These are very, very important and a little bit more noteworthy, in my opinion, than those on the offensive side of the football. That is coming up next right here on Locked On Vols. But I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Major League Baseball season is happening right now. The All-Star game was a couple nights ago with the Home Run Derby. The second half is about to begin, and there's no better place to bet on all your Major League Baseball action than over at FanDuel Sportsbook, because you can take your first swing at MLB betting and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. It's all in the safe, secure, easy-to-use app where you get paid instantly after you win your bets. It can be run line, money line, total, individual prop bets for the first hit of the game, the first strikeout, the first home run, whatever you want Major League Baseball is concerned, you can bet on it over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Sign up today by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Guys, appreciate you being here on a Thursday Locked On Vols. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to the Locked On Vols YouTube channel, I encourage you to go ahead and do that. We're trying to get to 8K by kickoff. Help me out by subscribing to Locked On Vols on the YouTube channel. And, of course, listening. Apple Podcasts, Odyssey app, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a follow and a subscription there if you would be so kind. All right, offensive position battles in segment 1. Let's talk about the defense. Again, continue to say this. The South Carolina game happened. You can't ignore it. But really, that's the only blip in the radar, in my opinion. The defense was so much better in 2022 than anybody wants to give it credit for. You got to throw the total yardage out the window, okay? The secondary's got to improve. And a lot of that's tied into the front line. I'll get into that here in just a moment. But Tennessee's defense improved in third downs, fourth downs, red zones, takeaways, all that. Got to play complementary football. And I think Tennessee's defense will certainly take a step in 2023. The position battles, though, that are of key importance heading into fall camp for Tennessee that they got to figure out. And maybe it's the first couple weeks of the season they're figuring it out. And remember, defense is very much rotational. You rotate a ton on defense. You play a lot of guys on defense, kind of like the running back position and wide receiver position at most other programs. But let's start with the Leo position, because if your secondary is going to improve, if you're going to cut down on passing yards allowed per game and go from 127th in the nation and 13th in the SEC to down to 65 or 60 or top 50 or whatever, and top half of the SEC, you have got to get a better pass rush with your front four. The Leo position is so important, and there'll be a ton of guys that play the Leo position. And in pass rushing situations, some of those guys will be on both sides, and you'll scoot in some of those exterior guys on the inside, like Tyler Barron. But you got to be better. And so what's that rotation going to look like? Is Roman Harrison, who's the steady Eddie veteran, who has played a ton of snaps each of the past 2 seasons, he's probably going to be your quote-unquote starting Leo, but his production in terms of getting sacks has got to improve. The high upside guys, Joshua Josephs, played a whole lot as a true freshman last year, and that was good to see, but he's got to get home more. James Pierce racked it up in mop-up duty. He's probably got the highest ceiling of anybody we're talking about right now, but how big of a step and how many actual snaps and meaningful football is he going to get early on in the season? If Tennessee wants to get where it's going to go defensively, James Pierce has got to step up. And then you have a true freshman, Caleb Herring, who ran into a little bit of an injury bug. He kind of messed up his knee a little bit. Had some inflammation there, some swelling in spring ball. Looks like he's ready to go and everything, and he's put on some weight, and he is long, explosive coming off of the edge as well. How much can he have an impact for Tennessee's defense in 2023? Those are your 4 Leos. All 4 of those guys are going to play, but they've got to separate themselves. They've got to get home, because it is crucial. It is so crucial to your defense that you get home with a front 4. Roman Harrison will play a ton, but my question is, what's the use of 50 snaps if you're not getting home a couple of times, right? I understand there's other run responsibilities and all that type of stuff. I'm not trying to take away from there, but those guys got to push each other. So number 1 position battle I'm paying attention to in fall camp, the Leo position. I think it's the most important. Now, the position battle you're probably wondering about is cornerback, and arguably that could be Tennessee's number 1 position battle of all, offense, defense, and all that. You have so many returning guys. Listen to this list, okay? You've got Doneiko Slaughter, Kamal Hadden, Brandon Turnage, Warren Burrell. You add Gabe Jeudy-Lally into the mix. You have some freshmen like Jordan Matthews and Ricky Gibson who are going to push these guys. Those are a lot of names. You can only play 2 cornerbacks. Who is it going to be? You guys know my thoughts on Doneiko Slaughter. I think the world of him in terms of playmaking ability, hit stick, all that type of stuff. He was brand new to the position last year. With an offseason to train, spring practice, fall camp, what does he look like as a full-time cornerback? I think he's going to be one of the best options, and I think he'll be a starter for Tennessee for sure. Kamal Hadden, so inconsistent in 2022. Had a really, really good spring practice months in the spring of 2023. Can he take the step? Can he find some consistency? Can he shut his mouth and play football? That's what I'm kind of wondering. Brandon Turnage seems to be just like a gamer. He's not a flashy practice player. He's got a little bit been bit by the injury bug, but Brandon Turnage kind of shows out. When he's in the ball games, excluding that South Carolina game when really nobody showed out. And then you have Warren Burrell, who's been a 3-year starter, started last year, got injured during the Pittsburgh game, and we didn't see him again. But even before that, he was giving up some passes left and right and had a really poor ending to his 2021 season. How's he going to respond? How are these younger guys going to push it? Cornerback is wide open. Doneiko Slaughter's got to play somewhere, in my opinion, but cornerback is wide open. And I didn't even mention Gabe Jeudy-Lally, who has 3 years of SEC experience, was a freaking baller at BYU last year, coming in with so much experience and playmaking ability. Can he factor in there? Can he earn a starting job? I will say this. There'll be 2 starters, but I think Tennessee is deep and experienced enough now to where if there's a mistake made, you got Tim Banks and Willie Martinez saying, hey, go get him. Hey, go get him. Hey, go get him. Whereas in the last couple of years, you haven't had that. So cornerback, arguably the biggest position battle of all the team here for Tennessee. It's my number 2 position on defense, and I'm watching out for. Safety as well. Pro Football Focus released top returning safeties of the college game for the 2023 season. Wesley Walker was number 1. It's funny to me as well because Wesley Walker played the majority of his time at Tennessee in 2022 last year at the star position. But he'll play safety this year. And who's going to be next to him? Is it going to be Jalen McCullough, who has a court hearing here in a couple of weeks? And right now he's doing everything with the team and everything, and that's good. He's a full participant. He's even leaned up his body a little bit. But, we'll see what happens at that court date. Is it going to be Jalen McCullough, who's been a 3-4 year starter for Tennessee? What about Andre Turrentine, that really never cracked the rotation last year after coming over from the transfer portal? What about Jordan Thomas, who showed out on special teams, had a bit of an injury in spring, but it looks like he's going to be ready to go. I think he's got a high upside as well. Or could it be a freshman in John Slaughter, who impressed a lot of the Tennessee coaches during bowl practices and spring practices? I think Wesley Walker's going to be a safety, but who's going to be the other safety? And the same with cornerback. I think you're at a point now to where you're experienced enough to where you can send in guys if something goes wrong. So safety is another one to watch out for. And then finally, what about LB3? That is linebacker. I think the first 2 guys out there is going to be, first of all, this will be a rotational position, and you are deeper now at linebacker than you've ever been since Brian Jean-Marie and Tim Banks have been here under Josh Heupel. That's a good thing. Aaron Beasley, your LB1. Okay, Keenan Peely coming over from BYU, his experience and all that, he'll be the second one out there. Those are your 2 starters, in my opinion. But there will be more that plays. Who's LB3? Who's that first linebacker to come off the bench? Is it Elijah Herring, who saw a little bit of playing time as a freshman, is taking a step this offseason? Could it be Caleb Perry, who played special teams as a freshman last year, but didn't really see much action at the linebacker position? Or, and I wouldn't even call him a sleeper because he's going to play a lot, Arian Carter, true freshman. Could he be that LB3? Regardless, these guys are going to play. It's going to be a rotational position, which is great for Tennessee. But I think Arian Carter potentially could be that first linebacker off the bench because he looks the part. He played the part in the spring. I think the sky's the limit for him. So on defense, Leo, position battles, the Leo position, cornerback position, the second safety position, and LB3, the first linebacker off the bench to come in and help this Tennessee defense. Those are the position battles that I am tracking, that I'm looking out for entering fall camp, and I'm sure you are as well. Let's shift gears. Tennessee Major League Baseball. How did the Vols fare? We spoke about it a little bit on yesterday's show. We're going to get Mike Wilson of Knox News to come on and have a conversation about how it was a pretty good showing for the University of Tennessee. All that coming up next, right here on Locked On Vols. Hey, welcome back into Locked On Vols here on this Wednesday. Got Mike Wilson, Knox News. You can follow his work at @MikeWilson on Twitter. Does an awesome job covering Tennessee football, basketball, and baseball. And Mike, another good showing for Tennessee and Tony Vitello in the Major League Baseball draft. 8 volunteers selected, second most all time, second in the SEC. A really good couple days for the program.
Absolutely, yeah, and set that program record with 6 pitchers taken as well. It really does mirror, obviously, the on-field success that Tony Vitello is having at Tennessee. 2 College World Series berths in the last 3 years, number 1 team in the country, 57 wins 2 years ago. Those teams have pros. That's a big reason why these guys are winning at such a high level. What was it, 7 draft picks in 2021, program record 10 in 2022, then 8 this year. You're talking about 25 guys being drafted in a 3-year window. That was unheard of for Tennessee, even in the 40-round draft. So it really does tell you a large reason why there's so much success here, because Tony Vitello and his staff are recruiting talent and developing it into pro-caliber guys pretty darn well.
We'll start with Chase Dolander. Goes in top 10, 9th overall to the Colorado Rockies. By the way, Rockies, big-time Vol fans, obviously, taking Seth Halverson later, Jordan Beck last year. But Chase Dolander, top 10, the highest pitcher selected since Luke Hochaver went number 1 overall back in '06. Highest Vol drafted since Nick Senzel went number 2 overall in 2016. What do you like about this pairing, Chase Dolander and the Colorado Rockies?
Yeah, Colorado loves the Vols, man. Took Seth Halverson there in the 7th as well. Took Jordan Beck in the supplemental first last year. So they're coming to Knoxville quite a bit lately. They must be the Rocky Mountain, Smoky Mountain. Let's go with that being the thing. So, I mean, Doe was talked about as a potential first or number 1 going into the year. Obviously didn't have the exact year that he wanted, but I mean, he was going to be a top 15 pick basically regardless. Unless something wild went wrong, it seemed like he was going to be that no matter what, just because the stuff is there. It was seen as a sophomore. So you're betting that he can kind of regain exactly who he was as a sophomore in terms of stuff, because that slider just wasn't the same and the stuff didn't quite pitch as well. So it was always kind of a lock, right, that Dolander was going to be a very high pick, and he was. Curious how the Colorado pairing goes. Obviously, if Doe gets up to the big leagues there, he's a guy who gives up a lot of home runs, is what we saw this year. And Colorado is a place for home runs, so that might be that warning sign. But he's got all the pitches, he's got the makeup, and again, if he can very much be the guy he was as a sophomore, and then probably late this year he strung together some quality starts. If he can be that guy, you're going to see that guy in the big leagues at some point.
Baseball's all a business, and the draft is such a business, and we saw that firsthand with Jared Dickey. He came into the draft ranked 115 by MLB Pipeline. That's a 4th-round pick. That's early to mid-4th-round pick, and he slid, and he did not get drafted in day 2. However, he was a priority pick. The Royals, assuming the Royals is going to throw some money his way and get him to sign, but took him with the 5th pick in day 3, right there on the 11th round. It was a tough day for Jared Dickey, but I think at the end of the day, he's going to get he's going to get some money, all right, close to about where he was supposed to be drafted anyway. And Jared Dickey, a professional hitter, and that's what the Royals and a lot of teams liked about him.
Yeah, the MLB draft is a little interesting in some ways, and I think it's misunderstood in some ways, in that more or less the way the draft starts is agents/players communicate with teams. Here's the number that I will sign for. I'm like, here's my dollar value to go professional. That's especially prevalent when you talk about a high school recruit and a commit. They might say, hey, I'm not signing for under $1 million no matter where you take me. So if you take me in the 12th round or the 3rd round, that's like the minimum number that I'm signing for. College guys do the same thing. And Jared Dickey's a guy with 2 years of eligibility remaining. So he's got good leverage there to come back to Tennessee if he had wanted to. Obviously, he ended up getting drafted in the 11th round, but he might have had a number where he said, hey, I'm not signing for less than this no matter where you take me. And that might have been why some teams didn't go with him early in the draft. So it did end up working out in his favor, it seems, with the Royals taking in the 11th round there. I'd heard other teams were kind of looking at taking him 2 in the 11th round, and the Royals obviously jumped in there early and made him the pick. But yeah, the whole way the MLB draft works is just that kind of sliding scale of money / where a team wants to take you.
All right, so at the time of this recording, looks as if Tennessee's going to lose Ryan Galaney, going to go to the Chicago White Sox, and that's probably expected, right? This was a fallback plan coming to Tennessee, a good one at that, but it was a fallback plan. He wanted to be a professional, but when you look at the high school signees, I mean, pretty good draft for Tennessee. You're going to lose Carson Rucker, who was taken about 20 slots over his ranking in the 4th round, but those arms, they're going to be here on Tennessee's campus, and they're going to be counted on, in the bullpen and, maybe big-time situations on the weekend.
Yeah, and Galaney's intent always seemed to be to go professional first. So, when you talk again about a signing number, his might have been a little bit lower just because the leverage is different when you talk about, I've got 1 year left. If I go to Tennessee, maybe I boost my draft stock. In a year, I get drafted and have nowhere, no leverage really to go. So it might have ended up being paid the same at that point. So not a huge shocker there to hear Galaney intends to sign with the Chicago White Sox. The draft class, as you said, there were some other guys that could have been taken beyond Carson Rucker. I think he and Matthew Dallas were kind of those two you expected, maybe the most likely guys. Brad Keylori, JUCO guy, was definitely in the mix there as well. He did not get taken. So Tennessee's class, other than Carson Rucker, is intact. Matthew Dallas, I talked to him maybe midway through the 7th round on day 2. He said, I'm coming to school. I know other people reported some other guys coming to school, but you're getting Braden Sharp, a 2-way guy out of Texas, Derek Schaefer, a mid-90s righty arm out of Arizona. Antigua, the shortstop out of Florida, highly regarded guy, big bat. You're getting all those guys coming in. Dean Curley was a top 250 guy, an infielder out of California. He and Dallas both are 2-year draft guys. So they also are then eligible in 2025. But I mean, about as good as it could go for Tennessee from the recruiting class perspective to get that many guys to campus, even though the Carson Rucker hit is a big one because he rose up this spring in a serious way. And the buzz on him was it's Jake Rucker, just bigger. And Jake Rucker obviously was a tremendous performer for Tennessee for 3 seasons.
All right, Mike, last thing, what do you like about this transfer portal haul so far? It's not over. Still a big fish out there. Tennessee's trying to win over in Luke Holman, but Billy Amick, big one. Cannon Peebles, a big one. Nate Snead, I mean, among others. Looks like it's one of the best, if not the best, and certainly if you get Holman classes this offseason for the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, they've added a lot of versatile bats, which is a good way to approach this. They've added 2 guys who can catch. I mean, Cannon Peebles is primarily a catcher. Dalton Bargo from Missouri is a guy that can catch, but can play the corner infields, DH, play the corner outfield positions. So you brought in versatility there. Billy Amick historically has been a first baseman / DH. He wanted to play third base. He's going to get every shot to do that at Tennessee. So you've addressed some versatile guys out in the field there. I think that's a really nice thing that the Vols have done there. Obviously, adding a couple arms was imperative, especially with the way that the arms got hit in the draft. I mean, maybe there was a chance Zach Joyce was back. Jake Fitzgibbons was already in the portal. Bryce Jenkins got drafted late by the Mets. So you're talking about replacing some arms now. AJ Causey and Nate Snead are going to be very high up in that mix. So Tennessee's done a good job so far. I expect them to keep going. I think you talk about probably wanting to add a starter, and Luke Holman is obviously one of those guys. A couple other names out there in the mix for that as well. But yeah, I think ideally you add an experienced starter just because you know Drew Beam, you know what you've got there. Everyone expects AJ Russell to take a huge leap as a sophomore. But I think if you can avoid having 2 pitchers you're counting on to take a huge leap, you feel a little bit more comfortable with that. But I also could be a moron for that because going into 2022, Tennessee didn't know what it had in starting pitching for sure. Once Blade Tidwell got hurt and Chase Dolander, Chase Burns, and Drew Beam turned out to be a pretty good trio.
That they did. You can follow his work on Twitter @by Mike Wilson and read his work over at knoxnews.com. Mike, appreciate it as always, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff there from Mike Wilson, as always. I really encourage you to follow his work at knoxnews.com and at @by Mike Wilson on Twitter. One of the good guys in this market, and he does a heck of a job. Hey, you guys do a heck of a job for tuning in to Locked On Vols each and every day. You everydayers can't do it without you. I tweeted this out a couple nights ago, but hey, Locked On Vols back into the top 100 football podcasts in America. Shout out to you guys for making that happen. Let's continue to climb the charts. We're at 87 right now. Let's get up there to the top 50. That's our challenge. Couldn't do it without you guys, you everydayers, and everybody listening and watching who subscribe and support the show. We'll come back tomorrow, tie a bow on this week's worth of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.